both happened on or around Halloween. So we are quickly approaching Halloween, so I thought that would be appropriate. Now, I will say before we begin, today's case does involve occurrences of assault, both physical and sexual. So if that is something that could be or is triggering to you, just proceed with caution. This may or may not be the video for you, so it's okay if it's not. You can click off now, and I won't be mad at you. So today's case, I'm going to be looking off my phone here. We're going to be talking about a boy or a man, a young man named William Liske. He went by the name BJ, so that's what I'm going to refer to him as in this video. He has also adopted the nickname the Toledo Blade, but again, we're going to refer to him as BJ. So it was Halloween morning in 2010. 16-year-old Devin Griffin came home from church. He was a choir boy. He was involved in the church, so even though the rest of his family did not go to church that morning, he went himself. And when he came home, what he found was so shocking that at first he thought it was some kind of Halloween prank that his family was pulling on him. However, he quickly realized that it was not a prank. So after church, he wanted to just unwind, enjoy the rest of his day, and play some video games. When he came home from church, he realized that the house was very, very quiet, and it was late morning, early afternoon at this point, so it was rare for the house to be that quiet. Usually his mother was up and about, cleaning something or just doing something around the house. So he thought that it was very weird. So he decided to go look for his family members. So he went into the master bedroom and he saw his mother, Susan, who was 46 at the time, and his stepfather, William Liske, in bed with the covers pulled over their heads. And so he thought that they were just sleeping. So he walks in, he's, talking to them, trying to, get them to wake up, hey guys, what are you still doing in bed, that kind of thing. He noticed that his mother's foot was poking out from the covers. And so he kind of started tapping her foot a little bit as he walked around to her side. And they still weren't waking up. They were not moving, it was just silent. So he pulled the covers back from their heads, and he saw them both lying in a mess of blood. Their pillows were soaked red. And this is where it was brief, but for a brief moment he really did think that it was a prank. Then he very quickly realized that they were not alive anymore, and so he ran from his house screaming, and he called his aunt for help because he didn't know what else to do. They eventually called authorities, and detectives showed up at their house and sure enough found Susan and William in bed. William had been shot 5 times. Susan had been shot 3 times and was also sexually assaulted. They were not sure if it happened before or after she was shot, but regardless, that still happened. Now, police then went to check on Derek Griffin, another one of Susan's sons. Susan and William, this was not their first marriage, so they both had children from separate marriages. So this was another stepson of William's. And police went to his room, and the door had been locked from the outside, which is very weird. So they kicked the door in, and they found him sleeping, curled up in a ball under the covers, facing the wall. So I guess his bed was in the corner or something. They very quickly realized that he was also dead, and the coroner ruled it blunt force trauma to the head. So he had been knocked out multiple times in the head by a very hard object, and it was so bad that they ruled that he most likely died within minutes of the first blow to the head. Later, investigators found a bloody claw hammer, which is just a regular a regular hammer. They found that elsewhere in the house, and it was bloody, and so that was believed to be the weapon. There were muddy footprints leading out the back of the house towards the pond. Their family had a pond in their backyard, and so they thought, okay, whoever did this probably threw like the gun or something else that they used as a weapon into the pond. So they drained the pond, but they didn't find any weapons. But it makes sense as to why they did that, because of the footprints leading out to the back. The coroner ruled that there were no signs of a struggle from any of the victims. All three of them were pretty much in sleeping positions. And yeah, there was no sign of a struggle. Nothing under the nails, to scratch, nothing like that. So it could have very well happened while they were asleep. So now, very quickly, a suspect in this case was 24-year-old BJ, who was now William's son, the stepbrother of the other two boys. He was the only one that was nowhere to be found, so immediately he became a suspect for investigators. They found him, and we'll get into a little bit of the background of why he ended up where he did that day, but investigators quickly found him at the family's hunting cabin, and they arrested him right then and there. Now, they arrested him as a suspect in just his father's murder, because they technically couldn't prove anything yet, but they booked him as a suspect for his father's murder, so at least they could hold him until they figured everything else out. And before they could present the case to the grand jury. So now Devin, the 16-year-old boy that had found his family members that morning, who had gone to church, he had spent the night at his father's house the next morning, or the previous night. He had slept at his father's house, but before he went to church, he went home to Susan's home to change his clothes and put his church clothes on. And he remembered seeing BJ there that morning. And now BJ didn't live there at the time, but he didn't really think anything of it too much. Although he did remember BJ was asking him where he was going and how long he would be gone, which again, he thought it was very weird for BJ to care. BJ was not close to any of the family members. We'll get into it again in a little bit. But he was not close to the family members, so he was like, why does he care all of a sudden where I'm going and how long I'm going to be gone? But again, he thought nothing of it. He was like, I gotta go to church. Whatever. But now, in hindsight, it wasn't too weird given BJ's mental issues and certain situations that have happened in the past. So had a lot of mental health issues. Going back 8 years prior, in 2002, BJ's father called 911 on him because he was threatening to harm himself. BJ. Then 2 years later, in 2004, he got into a fight with his stepmother and struck her really hard in the chest. 2 months after that, he was charged with assault and robbery. He stole her car keys after smacking her really hard in the face with a mug. However, later the charges were dropped because he wasn't found suitable or competent enough to stand trial, so they dropped the charges. So they're sensing a theme here. BJ did not like his stepmother at all. After his father married her in 2001, he didn't like the order that she was trying to instill in their household. And so he was very open about the fact that he didn't like her and took out a lot of his aggression on her. He was eventually moved into a group home. It was called the Sandusky Group Home for Mental Health Patients. Now, his father visited him very regularly. He tried to take care of him as best as he could when he was in the halfway house. And even with him there were still incidences that were taking place. There were at least 3 recorded encounters with the police while he was there. And one actually involved a physical fight with his father. So that's how you know it was bad, because his father was trying so hard to take care of him. So basically his father kicked him out of the house when he was 18 after he actually tried to attack his stepmother in the shower. So after that, his father knew it was not safe for him to be there, and so that's when he put him into the group home. But even after like all the dangerous situations that BJ put himself in and his family, you know, his father still tried to take care of him as best he could. He would visit him all the time. Like, he still showed him so much love because that was his son, you know. And so he really tried to take care of him. And he tried to never give up on him. Now, BJ was hospitalized in 2007 for schizoaffective disorder, and he had the bipolar type. So that began to explain some of the behaviors that were going on. Now, when neighbors were asked what they thought of BJ, they said that they were always very wary of him. They suspected him of killing neighborhood pets, and just animals in general around the house. And because he wasn't seen as competent even after he was 18, his father filed for guardianship of him so that he could still like take care of him. So now this is just an example of just what his father tried to do for him. So the day before all the murders took place, before Halloween, his father took him on a hunting trip, just the two of them. He took time off of work and took the two of them to their hunting cabin. And they just spent a day there, just father and son, bonding and whatever. He felt like this was the right thing to do for his son. And they came home from the trip less than 24 hours before the murders took place. Derek, William's older stepson, the one who also was killed, he did not join because, again, he did not get along with BJ. Neither of the boys did. And, William didn't want to put anyone in any dangerous situation, so he just kept it father and son. After the trip, they stopped not too far away from home for a couple of beers, again, just father and son. And William had BJ sleep in their house that night because they had drank, and he didn't think it was, it wasn't safe for him to drive or for him to drive William home or whatever. So because they drank, went and both slept in William and Susan's house, which explains why BJ was there, even though he didn't live there, and why Devin, I always get Devin and Derek mixed up, and why Devin found him there that morning, that Halloween morning. So they made up the couch for him, and that's where BJ slept. Now, Michelle Gridell, I believe you pronounce it, she was a neighbor. She told investigators that she heard something that sounded like gunshots, like a popping noise, around 6:30 a.m. So it's believed that the murders took place then. And after everything happened, and after BJ ran into Devin, he stole the family's truck. They had a Ford pickup truck. He stole it and drove it back to the hunting cabin. I guess he couldn't think of another place to go. And he was there for less than an hour before they came to get him. So eventually BJ pleaded guilty in 2011 to 3 counts of aggravated murder. Before his sentencing in September of 2011, he apologized for killing his father, his stepmother, and his stepbrother, blaming his mental illness and Satan for his actions. Because of his plea, because he confessed, he was not given the death penalty, even though he could have. But instead, he was given 3 life sentences in jail without the possibility of parole. So he was meant to spend the rest of his life in prison. Now, during the trial, I have a quote from him, and it was said that when he said this, he was like emotionless. So he said, "I loved my dad very much, and it makes me sick every time I think about what I did. I can't really explain why all this had to happen, but I think most of all it had to do with my mental illness." That was one of the only quotes that I could find from him during the trial. And then on March 31st, when BJ was 29 years old, he was found dead in his prison cell due to a self-inflicted injury. So he did end up taking his own life, and that is how BJ died. So it's a very, very tragic story. Devin was the only one that survived. Thank God he had to go to church, and thank God he spent the night before with his father, or else he most likely would have been another one of BJ's victims. And so it gives me a little bit of comfort to know that Devin still had his father, because he was 16, he was so young, you know. So at least he had his father and went to live with his father, and, you know. But, you know, I can't imagine coming home and seeing like a sight like that, you know. So it's a very tragic story, but that is the story of William and BJ Liske, or the Toledo blade. So this was a little more of a simple case, but I thought it was worth doing a video about, so I hope that you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.